I know that you're afraid. You're afraid of us. You're afraid of change.
Heard them say that a paper passport fell out of one of the towers and was picked up by a police officer on the street. This plane flies into the building, explodes with jet fuel out of the guy's jacket, goes through the fireball, through the side of the plane, out of the burning building, out of the fire shooting out, and comes down to the ground unscathed. But something happened. For 6 months they reported they had this passport. Boy, we've got it, we've got the proof. And then the guy stood up and was alive in the Middle East, and they pulled it and said, oh, that was a mistake. He wasn't a hijacker, and the story just disappeared.
So what about the hijackers? It's the funniest thing, but at least 9 of them are still alive. Walid al-Shari is a Saudi Airlines pilot in Casablanca, Morocco. Wael M. al-Shari is alive and well. Abdulaziz al-Amari is a Saudi Airlines pilot living in Saudi Arabia. Mohand al-Shari is alive in Saudi Arabia. Khalid al-Madar is a computer programmer in Mecca. Salam al-Hamzi works at a chemical plant in Yanbo, Saudi Arabia. Saeed al-Ghamdi is training to be a pilot in Tunis. Ahmed al-Nami is an administrative supervisor for Saudi Airlines. And last but not least, Mohammed Atta's father claimed to receive a phone call from his son on September 12th. 14 of the hijackers based their training in Florida, and the 5 that allegedly hijacked Flight 77 lived in a motel right outside the gates of the NSA. Not to mention, the official autopsy report for Flight 77 does not list the hijackers. And the opening paragraph makes no mention of their absence. After these discrepancies were pointed out, FBI Director Robert Mueller brushed it off, saying that the hijackers were using stolen passports and may not have had tickets, so there's no way to know who they actually were. So, if there's no proof that the hijackers were members of Al-Qeada, or if they were even on the plane in the first place, what justification do we have for bombing Afghanistan?
We have a Republican here tonight who's here to prove this is and should be a nonpartisan issue. I'd like to hear from Carl Schwartz, please. Carl.
What they found inside the FBI actually came from ongoing drug investigations dating back to 1998. And I heard the other day, just a minute ago, Mr. Thompson brought up Argentina. The company that had the contract with the Taliban is Brightest Corporation. They are from Argentina. On September 9, 2003, they won a lawsuit in our Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. They had been tied up in the Texas courts since 1996. They won $500 million in a judgment for interference of contract in Turkmenistan. The only remaining thing was to take the Taliban and Brightest out. And then we control it all. We control the Caspian Basin oil. We have the pipeline to get it to the sea. The oil and gas in the Caspian Basin in current dollars is worth somewhere between 11 and 12 trillion dollars. If you look at who was on the 9/11 Commission, on the Democrat side, who was directly benefiting, Mr. Ben Venice law firm was the law firm that kept Brightest tied up. They're also the law firm that lost the lawsuit when it went to the Supreme Court and the Fifth Circuit. They kept them tied up at least from 1998. They're involved in Pakistan, Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, and Uzbekistan in about 20 different ways. You got the guy Thompson, the Republican governor, former governor of Illinois. He is sitting on the board of FMC. They have an oil and gas subsidiary. They make equipment. They're selling a lot of it overseas in the Caspian. Jamie Gorelick, I thought she was going to be a go-getter. I mean, I was rooting for her because she acted like she knew what she was doing. She sits on the board of Schlumberger, which is a competitor to Halliburton. Just within 2 weeks prior to the 9/11 Commission saying Sinai died and handing it over to the President and Congress to change our rights some more, which is what I think they plan to do, Schlumberger finally comes forward and admits they're having record profits in this last quarter, and they're doing a lot of big bucks business in the Caspian Basin. If you look at the reality that Brightest had a contract with the Taliban, we had landlocked oil and gas deals. We had to get it to the ocean. We had people actually doing business in Pakistan. You literally have to look at 9/11 and all of those foregoing issues as inseparable. There is your Pearl Harbor. I call them financial terrorists. I don't know what you would call them.
The 9/11 hijackers are alive and well. That's according to the chief of Japan's Democratic Party, who says 9/11 is a hoax. Dr. David Ray Griffin is a professor and author who wrote the book, The New Pearl Harbor Revisited. He joins us from Santa Barbara, California. So I'm guessing that you think that, and this is just an assumption on my part, that maybe this parliamentarian from Japan may have a point in determining whether 9/11 was really a hoax or not.
Oh, absolutely. The physical evidence is so strong for the destruction of the World Trade Center by explosives that we're really in the level of proof now, not conjecture. So on that score, I've just written a book on World Trade Center 7. It's called The Mysterious Collapse of World Trade Center 7, Why the Official Story, the final official account of 9/11 is unscientific and false. And I, in that book, give a massive amount of evidence that's been compiled by scientists, architects, and engineers that all three buildings, although in that book I focus on World Trade Center 7, were brought down by explosives. There's simply no other possibility. And the only way that NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, which wrote the official report, the only way they were able to deny that was to commit massive scientific fraud, which in simple words simply means they lied, and they lied.
Dr. Griffin, the politician who I'm talking about in Japan, his name is Yukihisa Fujita, and his claims are that 8 of the 19 hijackers are still alive and well, that this was all created by not necessarily terrorists, but people who were trying to benefit off the stock market. How much of this are you buying? How much of this argument are you buying from Mr. Fujita? Or do you believe that it is kind of an inside job, but for other reasons?
Well, first of all, we have to be careful about this Washington Post editorial. Fujita himself says that they really distorted what he said. So we can't take that too seriously. But that said, certainly let's take the issue of the hijackers, whether there were 8 or so. We certainly know that some were still alive after 9/11. Walid al-Shiri, for example, showed up in Morocco and gave a press conference. The BBC reported on it, and they said there's no doubt about the fact that he is the man because they had published, FBI had sent his picture around the world, and it was the same man. And then there's his brother. And yet when the 9/11 Commission wrote its account, they said that Walid and Wael al-Shiri were the ones probably on Flight 11 who stabbed the flight attendant. So they just ignored the fact that these 2 guys were still alive.
Dr. Griffin, real quickly, then the question becomes to you, why? Why would the government kind of cover this up, hide all this information?
Well, what we have here is an extreme example of something that governments, imperialistic governments, have done for a very long time. They're called false flag operations. You attack your own people, you blame another country or another group that you already had reasons to want to attack. Hitler did this when he was ready to attack Poland. That's how World War II got started. Japan did it when they were ready to attack Manchuria. That's how the Asian part of World War II got started. Our government did it in this case, planting evidence that these attacks were carried out by members of Al-Qeada. But it's interesting that even our FBI says they do not list Osama Bin Laden as wanted for 9/11. Now, our news media generally won't tell the people that, but it's the fact. And when one of our people asked the FBI, why don't you list Osama bin Laden as wanted for 9/11? And the fellow who was the head of investigative publicity said, because we have no hard evidence that Osama bin Laden was responsible for 9/11.
Okay, Dr. David Ray Griffin, author, thank you so much for joining us.